Go.
All right. Thank you, Stephanie and Heather, for taking on this work.
All right. Thank you so much, Patsy and Carly. We are really excited to be back with you for our third and final webinar. I will say we did have quite a few more people registered than who are here. So there might be people coming in. I also assume that could be people registered it with the hopes of being able to come, and we'll maybe watch the recording. So we'll kind of present, keeping that in mind that people might be watching us later if they couldn't make it. But for those of you who could make it today, thank you so much for carving out some time in your afternoon. I know this is such an exceptionally busy time of the year, so thank you for being with us. As Patsy mentioned, this is our third one of these webinars where we've been talking about all 6 of the categories in the ACES TIF. And today we'll talk about our final 2 categories, developing a future pathway and navigating systems. And I think it's true. I can say, I think these are 2 of our favorite categories for Heather and I. We have both been pretty heavily involved in work around helping students find jobs and do their career exploration. In a way, that's sort of how we both came into doing this work with Atlas. And so it's exciting to finish up with these 2 categories.
I would agree, Stephanie, and they're some of the categories that are near and dear to my heart in terms of adult career pathways and IET, and just we as adult educators support learners navigating all sorts of systems.
Exactly.
So thank you all for coming. Stephanie and I are actually sitting side by side, so you might see us glancing over at each other. My name is Heather Turngren. I am an adult education teacher with Minneapolis Adult Ed. I've been in the field for 25 years. I like to say experienced, not old. So bringing in all sorts of different teaching experiences that I've had throughout my career in adult ed.
And I am Stephanie Sommers. I also work for Minneapolis Adult Education. I have also been in the field for roughly the same amount of time as Heather. And in our program, wear a couple of different hats. I am a reading teacher, helping students prepare for the GED test in the area of social studies. I am also our adult diploma coordinator, and that is how I intersect a lot with these 2 categories, because if you know anything or about adult diploma or do any adult diploma work, you know that navigating systems and developing a future pathway are both areas in which students need to produce and submit evidence to get their adult diploma. So in recent years, when I think about these categories, that's where my mind goes. And those are the kinds of tasks I've been trying to create to help my students produce that evidence.
Wonderful. And we just would like you all again to take a moment to share in the chat your name and program. Some of you have been coming. I know Dawn and Chris, and I think even Carol there, you've been at all of our other sessions, but it's just helpful to remind us your program.
And if being that you've been in our other 2 webinars, this format will be familiar to you today. Looking at the agenda, we will begin again, just briefly touching on the course and what that final assignment looks like. And then we will take a closer look at each of those 2 categories, developing a future pathway and navigating systems. And then we'll wrap up, leaving some time for questions or comments. I know Carly will jump on and talk a little bit about getting your CEUs. And then also, if you did happen to miss either one of the earlier webinars, or if you know someone who might want to watch one of those, the links are included here, and those are both archived on the Minnesota Adult Ed Professional Development channel on YouTube. All right.
And thanks to Carly, she was sharing the link to the full TIF. Stephanie and I, we have our our older versions, hard copies, but we'll be using that. And we'd like to find out if you attended webinar 1, which focused on effective communication and learning strategies, or webinar 2, focusing on critical thinking and self-management skills. You can type yes 1 and yes 2, or 1 and 2 in the chat just to find out and help to refresh our memories. It just helps. So 1 and 2, 1 and 2. So great, Dawn and Krista. We know that for those of you who are attending all 3, there's that extra CEU incentive. Carly, yes, and yes. That's the same for all of us.
Mm-hmm.
Great.
Great. Okay, so I think because you have all been in our other webinars and we have been talking about the course the whole time, I don't really think we have to do this. Maybe instead of this, could you tell us one thing that has been useful for your practice or to deepen your understanding of ACES from the previous 1 or 2 webinars? So rather than focusing on the course, let's focus on the webinars. What was something that you have enjoyed? What's brought you back? Maybe it's the CEUs, maybe it's getting ideas from your colleagues about how to apply these skills. Maybe it's looking at some lessons. What has brought you back to the webinars? What has been useful?
And Carol, sorry that you couldn't make it to our second webinar. You can talk to maybe Patsy and Carly. I don't know if you can make it up for those extra CEUs. We'll see. Dawn says the application for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Carol wants to review both 1 and 2, the first 2 sessions.
Mm-hmm. A little bit of tech trouble there.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
which is also navigating all those systems to get online.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Okay, and we do appreciate everyone being here.
Yeah, Krista says I've used the self-management piece and added that into our regular work a bit more in the last 2 weeks. We are now doing the
Oh,
winter weather lessons. Great.
fantastic.
And I know, Krista, you were talking about adding that piece for students to say that they stepped away, part of that online self-management. I hope that worked really well. For me, I'm just thinking back to that ACES process, allowing time to reflect on that is always something that I need to do more.
Yes. And I think Krista's comment is a good kind of segue into thinking about our last webinar where we focused on critical thinking and self-management. So if we think about this final assignment, which is the transition map, and you think about a student or the students in your classroom, which of those skills from critical thinking or self-management do you see your students using, or have you been more intentional about trying to integrate? What do you think helps your students to develop the skills in these 2 areas? If we think about critical thinking and self-management, which were our last 2 categories.
And while you all are thinking, I'm going to be that verbal processor instead of typing in the chat. For me, I'm thinking about the critical thinking skills needed for students to also think about their own learning strategies. And that's been the focus of my professional learning community work, is having students think about what learning was best for them each evening, and then discuss strategies on how to help other students learn from that. One example was last week, a student was saying she needs to take notes, but she doesn't like to take notes. So another student offered her the suggestion, go buy yourself a really beautiful pen that you like and a nice notebook, and you can use that. Another student said that they watch the recordings that we'd have online, and then they feel it's, they can stop the recording and take notes better than in real life. So those were great strategies that had the students thinking about their learning, but then transferring that to others. It was wonderful.
Yes, and one thing that comes to my mind is yesterday I introduced a new skill in my online class. We started talking about paraphrasing and the specific strategy of using synonyms to replace certain words in a sentence when we create a paraphrase. And we talked about that for quite a while yesterday. Well, of course, I had some students today who had not been in class yesterday, and one of them was kind of, teacher, I need you to explain this to me. I wasn't here. And I said, okay, but you can watch the recording, right? So we're not going to take a lot of time right now because you have the tools to watch that recording and get caught up. And that is great self-management.
Yeah, and then it's just being explicit on showing them how to access the recording. And that is, I would say, one of the wonderful things coming out of online learning is that students can go back and review recordings.
Yeah. What about any of you? Let's see.
Carly says self-management seems to be a foundation to really any type of skill development, and I would agree with that. Krista says critical thinking with stories, skill 2, subset A. Ooh, thank you for even drilling down further. Our winter weather lessons are with stories from reading skills for today's adults.
Oh, great. Yeah, I do think there's one of the stories in reading skills is like a winter safety lesson, right? Yeah. That's great. So pairing those different things. Okay. And Dawn says she's not currently teaching, but appreciate the feedback. Do you work with other teachers, Dawn? Are you
She's, I think, the manager at Faribault.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. Okay, well, we're glad you can be here kind of as a conduit to other teachers who maybe aren't able to join us. Wonderful. Okay, great. And Krista's sharing the story. Yep,
Yeah,
great.
that's no emergency.
Wonderful. Okay, so we're gonna move on, and just in case anyone missed it, you can find out more about the course by going to the YouTube channel. So for example, if any of your instructors, Dawn, want to join this course and need some help getting started, if they watch the recording of the first webinar, the beginning part of that webinar dives quite deep into getting started with the course and going over the course navigation and all of those pieces for any new hires who might need that.
And Dawn says that she's recommended it to a few. I think it's really great, especially those who are new to adult education and this set of content standards.
All right. And then again, just as a reminder that the Transition Integration Framework, the TIF, CCRS, and North Star Digital Literacy together do make up our 3 sets of content standards here in Minnesota. And so programs do have a mandate to try to incorporate those 3 sets of standards into their instruction. And for anyone needing more information, there are resource libraries on the Atlas website for CCRS and ACES TIF. And of course, North Star has its own website with all types of supports. And I do think there was a crosswalk document created a few years ago that shows how North Star and ACES TIF kind of how the skills overlap and support each other. And so lots of resources out there for learning more about these things.
And thanks, Carly, for sharing all the links in the chat.
All right, so we will get going with developing a future pathway. So in your TIF, the future pathway category begins on page 37. And here we have this beautiful AI generated image that Heather made in Canva. We've got,
Oh, this one's ChatGPT.
oh, it's ChatGPT. Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm gonna
Okay.
get to Canva later,
Okay.
but this one, I have to remember passwords. That's gonna be my navigating
Ah.
systems and self-management.
All right. So we see a bunch of people at a board table, kind of doing some brainstorming, thinking about their future pathway. And of course, the skills in this category are all about identifying career options, trying to align those options with one's own skills and interests, and then successfully completing the steps to enter into a career pathway. All right.
If you take a look further, you can drill down into this skill 1, skill 2, skill 3. Skill 1 is evaluate personal skills, strengths, values, and beliefs to inform decisions about one's future pathway. Skill 2 is explore available options in order to identify one's future pathway. And skill 3 is effectively complete the steps needed to enter into a selected pathway. So they kind of follow a sequence, and it is having people think critically about their future pathway. Many of our adult learners, as you know, come because they want English or they want that GED, and we have to figure out what is their future plan with whatever it is that they're wanting from our programs. And getting into a career that will pay for their future, and it's not just a one job and they're always looking for new jobs, will be so beneficial to learners as well as to ourselves.
Absolutely. All right, and here are a few activity examples for each of those skills. So students complete an interest inventory by answering questions about what they like and don't like to do. There are a number of these types of interest inventories. You can find them online. You can also download paper copies, so a lot of options there. Students use online tools such as ONET, which is from the Department of Labor, or My Next Move in order to explore labor market trends and learn more about possible future careers. I'll also say I know some programs in Minnesota use MCIS, which is another great system for doing this kind of work. And then another activity idea, students create profiles on job search sites like LinkedIn or Indeed that include relevant work history, education, skills, and experiences. So that would be the step where we're ready to start putting ourselves out there, looking for job offers, and trying to attract the eye maybe of future employers.
Yeah, I think about that. Networking is a skill that is needed, and by this example activity, it's really supporting learners that way. As we've discussed in the past, the TIF has the skill listed at the top, the sub-skills. And then you can see going from the left to the right, there's that level of complexity. So when Stephanie was just talking about doing that career interest inventory of likes and dislikes, we could, if you take a look at the left column, you can bring it down to a very emerging literacy level with images. I like this, I don't like that. That is still students acknowledging their preferences. And then you could go all the way up to doing that online interest inventory with academic vocabulary. So I like to point out that you can use these activities in any adult education environment. You see the sample activities, there's sample technology activities. Some of those could be pumped up a notch with AI and such that we'll be talking about. Then you can look down at the bottom, you have those different contexts. The community for those learners who might not be stating right now they want to go and get a job, but they just want to be more part of their community or their school, as well as that working environment. So I really appreciate the complexity and the level and all of the intentionality that has gone into the TIF.
Great. All right, and as we've done in previous webinars, we're going to sort of walk through one of the activities from the course, which is having a discussion about a sample activity. So for this, you're going to look on pages 37 to 42. You're going to choose one of those sample activities, such as having students categorize images by likes and dislikes, right? That would be one example. You're going to talk about how you might use this activity with your students and what tweaks you would need to make. So if you'd like to add more of a technology piece, if you need to have no technology, maybe it needs to be all print-based, or adjust for the level of your students, those kinds of things. And we are a small group, so if people would like to use their microphones rather than sharing in the chat, I think that would be great. And we'll give you just a moment to look at those activities. And then we can share, and Heather and I will look too and look to come up with our own ideas.
And as you say that, I'm looking, Stephanie, at skill 2, sub-skill C, conduct
Mhm.
research on community resources, education, and training options. So many times we have the students come to the teacher asking, I need help for this, but if you could make that into an activity where all the learners are exploring what are some of the maybe high interest careers that offers certifications or perhaps a degree within your local community college. I think that would be great. So it's not all that is put upon the teacher as being the navigator, but the learners can be exploring online. So you can conduct online research for those community colleges and the occupations. Dawn is really navigating some skills right now. So thank you, Dawn, for letting us know. A lockdown drill.
Oh, okay.
I'm glad to hear that it's a drill. Okay, so that's something to navigate.
Of course. I was looking at the example on page 39, explore available options in order to identify one's future pathway. And a lot of these websites like ONET or My Next Move, they are great, but they are a little bit dense. They contain a lot of information that can be a little overwhelming for students. So I know one thing I've done in the past is create sort of like a guided notes sort of worksheet for students, so that when they're looking on the website, it helps to give them a framework for note taking about things like salary and education required, and where in the area one might go to get training and those types of things. But another website that I have liked before is from PBS, and it's called Career Connections. And that is sort of a collection of short videos of people in many different jobs. And I think for students who maybe struggle a little bit with reading or with navigating large amounts of text, that could be an alternative where instead of reading about many different, several different careers, they watch videos about the careers and then take notes that way.
And I was just multitasking and I shared that link in the chat. And Stephanie, Krista is saying, I like the survey, a partner activity, skill 1, subset B. I am always looking for good breakout room conversations. We could do this over several days. Wonderful. Krista, thank you. And as more of us are teaching online, I love to hear how you're already thinking about these breakout room activities.
Mm-hmm.
Carly says research careers using a website and taking notes on skills that are needed. Skill 2, sub-skill A, exactly. Stephanie and I were part of a project called the Career Awareness, integrating career awareness. And if you remember those skills that we were doing, or the work we were doing at very low level, having students come into the classroom and they say I can't do anything.
Mhm.
But then they had to teach others their skill. And Stephanie, you had students teaching about hair cutting that they had done in their previous country,
Yes.
about making a sandwich. I mean,
Yep.
just listing those skills and that is something that they could do.
Yep, everybody had to demonstrate a skill. So the project was called the National Career Awareness Project, and it was organized through World Education and the National College Transitions Network. And the curriculum piece, what we were doing in our classes was trying out some lessons. And that curriculum is called the Integrating Career Awareness Guide. And I bet Heather's going to try to find the link to that. And I actually heard that that's being updated. I think I
Yeah.
heard from Sandy Goodman that's being updated. But it's a great resource. It's a very robust resource. And Heather just put it into the chat. Lots and lots of great activities in there. Actually, I think my favorite one is called a job family tree, where students think about their family members and the types of jobs that they've had, and they create kind of a family tree organized around jobs. And then it helps them to think about how often our worldview around work is largely based on who we see in our family, right? So when I was doing the project, I had many Hmong students, and most of them, almost everyone said the people in their family were either soldiers or farmers, right? So if that's all that you've sort of been exposed to, then you're going to need to maybe broaden that awareness, because here in the US, those aren't really our two of our bigger jobs, right? So really great lessons in that toolkit. Yeah.
Yeah, and Krista says, I remember hearing about this from a PD workshop
Yep.
that you led previously,
Oh,
Stephanie.
great.
Yeah, the job family tree activity. Stephanie had a lower level class than what I had at the time.
Mhm.
My students had to write instead of draw, but it really made students become more aware of that influence of family, and I might say friends or community
Mhm.
has upon their career pathway.
And because I am the AD coordinator for our program, I will just add, a lot of these activities, creating a job family tree, doing an interest inventory, doing career exploration online. These are the exact types of things that can be used as evidence in an adult diploma portfolio.
Thank you all for sharing, and we hope Dawn is coming back from a safe drill.
All right, so we're going to review again the ACES process. So remember that when we are talking about ACES as an initiative or as a set of standards, right? The initiative ACES is academic, career, and employability skills. But we repurpose that same acronym and we talk about a process. And when we talk about the ACES process, the A stands for assess, the C is complement, the E is evaluate, and then study and reflect. And so we're going to think for a minute, and we can watch, this video is quite short, so we'll watch this video just to refresh us about the process before we do our next activity. Oops, let me see here. Let's see if I can get it right. There we go.
Now we've explored the developing a future pathways skills. Skill 1, evaluate personal skills, strengths, values, and beliefs to inform decisions about one's future pathway. Skill 2, explore available options in order to identify one's future pathway. And skill 3, effectively complete the steps needed to enter into a selected pathway. Now we will have a chance to look at the sub-skills that are found beneath each of the skills. As each sub-skill appears at the bottom of the slide, think about which skill it belongs to. Skill 1,
All right, actually, we think this is not exactly the right video. Sorry about that. This is about,
Skill 2.
We get the link to the,
I think this
we
link
have
to
to go
the,
back. Yeah, it'll be all right.
okay, all right. Heather says it'll
no.
be all right.
We can just stop it because it's not what we wanted with the ACES process.
All right,
but-
hold on. Oh my goodness. All right, there we go. So let's stop that. Okay, sorry about that. Hopefully we remember the ACES process and we can just talk you through it. Sorry, there's many different ACES video snippets and we must have linked to the wrong one there. So we apologize for that. But we are going to, once again, sort of implement the process, which is the best way to learn about it anyways. And as we have in our previous webinars, we're going to show you a kind of an example of something that could be fleshed out into a lesson. Right now, it's more of sort of an idea for a lesson or a representation of a lesson. And for this category, for this webinar, we decided to focus on the driver's license for all website, which getting a driver's license could be part of a career path for CDL, for example, or getting a driver's license is definitely a system that must be navigated. And in
Yeah.
fact, getting a driver's license is one piece of evidence that I often use for navigating systems with students in their adult diploma portfolio. So we are looking at the website here, Minnesota Driver's License for All, thinking about these different steps, okay?
And Carly just shared the link in the chat. So this image comes from the Department of Transportation of Public Safety, Department of Public Safety at Minnesota, just listing the steps that students need to get that driver's license. I always think about so many students just in order to get to a job, they need that driver's license, especially in greater Minnesota.
So maybe you're in your classroom, you're showing students this website, you're talking about the different steps to make it more about a future pathway. Perhaps you are talking about different careers that one would have access to if one had a license, right? Such as being having a CDL license and being a truck driver, being a bus driver, right? Either for the city or for the school district, maybe being a rideshare driver, right? So, and then certainly another piece of the conversation could be around, you know, if you have a driver's license, does that sort of open up the possibilities for where and when you can work? Because if you don't have a license and you're reliant on public transportation, that might make it more difficult to take certain jobs, right? So let's think for a minute, let's assess. Can you think of any DFP skills or sub-skills that talking about a driver's license might be related to? So I am looking here.
You know what I'm looking at? I'm looking at explore available options in order to identify one's future pathway. That's
Mhm.
skill 2.
Mm-hmm.
And perhaps explore the job market and current employment trends that might
Mhm.
work to see where the job market is. And I think about some of the students who attend the evening online classes that I teach. They might not live in Minneapolis. They're living in first and second ring suburbs, and what jobs are available in their area and how can they get there. One way would be to get a driver's license.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and Carly says training options, right? So I know a number of ABE programs do offer different types of driver's preparation. So in our program, we have a basic driver's license class. I know some other programs have a CDL class that you can
Yeah.
take.
Krista says skill 2 subset A, identifying
Mhm.
interests. Some people do like to drive. Some people are nervous and scared to drive. Exactly. There is that CDL class. I also, I don't know if you all have seen this, but I've seen within at least the metro area, some commercials highlighting some of our immigrant learners on becoming maybe DoorDash or some sort of
Yes.
delivery driver, and then contacting their I don't know, someone at the state legislature to make some changes, but that could be perhaps not a career, but steps to make it possible to get into a career.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and I also love what Carly put in the chat about collect documentation. Often, I know when we maybe are applying for a job or when we are going through the hiring process, presenting some sort of, identification is often a requirement, right? And so having that driver's license or state issued ID card would definitely be part of having what is necessary to fully get hired, right? So that's great as well. And talking with our students about those things ahead of time, because possibly they're not aware that that's going to be asked for if they get to the point of where they have an offer of employment. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so wonderful.
All right, so now we're going to, so we've kind of assessed a little bit. How could maybe just looking through this website, talking about it with students, how could that be part of a lesson? So we've assessed what ACES skills we would be practicing. Now we're going to complement, okay? And for this piece, we've added a little bit today because we did want to make things fresh for you. So we want to talk just a little bit about using generative AI. So when we talk about generative AI, we're talking about chat GPT is a very common one. And we're basically talking about any app that uses chatbots to help generate content for you. Okay. So how many of you are familiar with using something like ChatGPT or Canva to,
Familiar, great.
okay.
Carly is familiar. I know
Yeah.
she was just talking about using Canva, that. It is something that I find intriguing, although just listening to the news, I know there are some slippery slopes that we can go down. However, I really enjoy what Stephanie is showing us here, this prompt that she put in to develop a worksheet that is going to help your class. And how much time did you shave off of prepping for your class just with this, simple prompt?
Well, let me talk about that for a minute. And Dawn says she's used Canva, but not chat. Yeah, one problem with using like Chat GPT, I know Heather and I run into is it's blocked by our school district. So if we want to do any work using this tool, we have to do it from home. And so that is definitely an obstacle. I can't get into my Chat GPT account when I'm in a district building.
Oh, Krista, 0 GPT. Okay,
Oh, okay.
thank you for sharing that.
Yes.
I'm going to link that. I'm going to take a look at it. I appreciate learning, and I love how adult educators share.
So is the purpose of that, Krista, it's a tool to help identify if Chat GPT was used to create like a document by a student? Is that correct?
If you had a academic integrity policy and you weren't supposed to be using other people's work, right? You're supposed to be making your own work. And
Yes.
I don't know, as it seems like as soon as ChatGPT came out, the 0 GPT checker was not too far behind.
Okay.
And how valid it is up for debate, but
Okay.
yeah.
That's interesting. We just had a meeting yesterday with our adult diploma team, and one of the questions was, how are we checking to see if our students are using AI? And I did not know about this tool. So this is great because yes, using regular plagiarism checkers don't work very well when
With-
checking for AI because it's not exactly plagiarized, while at the same time, it's not a student's original work. Well, let's talk about how I used it to create something that I could use with my students. So as you probably know, in order to create anything with ChatGPT, you have to enter a prompt. And the prompt is sort of your description of what you want the AI to do. And a big thing about AI is the more specific your prompt is, the better tailored whatever they create is going to be. So your input has a direct relationship to the output that ChatGPT generates. You can also train your ChatGPT to learn about what things you like and what things you're looking for. If you consistently thumbs up or like the things that it makes for you, it will learn more about what you are looking for and provide you with better results. So I asked ChatGPT to create a worksheet for me based on the driver's license for all information. So my prompt is what you see here. I want to create a worksheet that would help adult students learn and remember the steps that they need to take in order to get a driver's license. And then I said, these are the 6 steps, and I listed the steps. So that was my input. And actually, I'll tell you something. I meant to include more information and I hit enter too soon. And I was surprised as heck to see what I got.
Yeah, and Carly, thank you for sharing a PDF of it in the chat, because then you can see it's not just what is on the screen. It is a lot of information
Yes.
on a worksheet.
Yes. So the chatbot created for me this worksheet, kind of a guided notes type navigation worksheet. And there is a piece that goes with each of the 6 steps. And then what is a newer feature, new since the last time I used ChatGPT, is when it finished creating this for me, it asked, do you want me to create a PDF printable worksheet? And I said yes. And so Carly has shared that. And you can see that it really does a great job of helping students think through what the steps and how they could successfully complete these steps. So what resources can I use to study? I am going to make a study plan. Okay, if I make my appointment, where am I going? What is the day and time? I will say, admittedly, this worksheet is probably better aligned with navigating systems than developing a future pathway, because I asked for it to focus on the steps. If I had asked for it to create something around different types of careers that are related to driving, it would have looked a little bit different.
Yeah, and you know what I really appreciate, Stephanie, is that there's space, that there's white space. And I don't know if it was built in because you said adult education in there, but it is not just crammed onto one sheet, that it is something that we would actually use in adult ed.
So yeah, I mean, this took a minute for ChatGPT to make. Here's a little bit more of what it looked like. So it talks about step 4. How are you going to practice? What skills do you need the most? How many hours will you practice? And then it talks about when you're ready for the road test. Have you gone through this checklist to make sure that you have the things you need to pass the road test? So the question, when we think about complementing our lessons, I was thinking about how we could use a tool like ChatGPT to do that complementing, right? So you could possibly upload or, copy and paste into ChatGPT a worksheet or a text that you were reading, and you could ask ChatGPT to suggest an activity or a task or create a worksheet that would help your students practice specific skills. And to do that, I would probably directly copy and paste the text of the skill from the TIF. I would put that in there. And I have done this before. I've said, I need a worksheet that would help a student practice this skill. I've done it mostly with CCRS skills and standards, and it will create something that is aligned. So we wanted to share this with you as sort of a time saver when we think about that complementing piece.
And Stephanie, I just go to think, like, this is for a driver's license, because we were thinking for driving CDL, but also people need a license in order to get to some jobs and career destinations. But in terms of doing that career exploration, or what sort of certifications or degree offerings are at a local college, you could share the website of the college and say, make a worksheet on what are the healthcare careers that are not nursing. Okay, so that students can see the vast array of careers in healthcare that do not fall within a nursing category. That is what comes to mind to me to do that, because so many students want to be nurses and then they come to the realization that they have to study or touch different body parts, and they might not want to do that. I recently had my blood drawn, and the student was telling me how she needed to go through to determine if that in fact was her career choice, phlebotomy, to make sure that they can handle that career, so to speak.
Yeah.
The blood.
Yes. So,
All
I mean,
blood.
I think the limits on what you can do with ChatGPT are really only bound by our own thinking and awareness, because it can do so much. And yes, we have to be careful, but it can be a huge time saver. So just thinking about using it when you are working with any kind of curriculum to include specific skills might be something that you could experiment with or take back to others in your program. And Heather's going to talk about another way of using it.
And this one was just to show you, I wanted to get an image generated for this presentation. Carly and I were talking about, she used, I think, Canva for an image, but you can look for open source images, and I feel like I spend so much of my time unproductively looking at images that aren't exactly what I need. So I created this image, and I just said, please create an image of adult education students focused on determining a career pathway. So you can see I use the free version of ChatGPT, and I can create 2 or 3 images a day. And as Stephanie was saying, that thumbs up or thumbs down, I had tried to say that I wanted an image that was more diverse, trying to show people perhaps wearing a hijab, etc. And I couldn't, because I had used up my number of images for that day period. And then I asked ChatGPT when I could generate another image, and they did not have an answer for me.
They said
So
maybe tomorrow.
they said they're not sure, but it is really a good way to get images that you might want to show for students. I remember in the days when we used to have catalogs, I would painstakingly cut out those catalog images and laminate them, and now I can just use ChatGPT for that, especially around careers that might not be on that PBS channel that you had mentioned. Yeah, Patsy, the laminating of magazine pics. I still keep a little set thinking just in case, because I spent so much energy. But this would have been easier, okay, for me to do, and now I can just project it. But it is a way, I'm developing my career pathway in adult education further that way.
That's a great point. When we learn new things, we are working on our own skills. Yes. All right. So in our previous webinars, we've talked about these TIF methods. These are ways to bring ACES skills into our classrooms without just relying on curriculum, right? So it's things like using academic or professional language, routines, learning task formats, technology, and norms. And with each of these, we're trying to make our classrooms a mirror of whatever target environment we think we want our students to be successful in next. So if we know our students are going into healthcare, or many of them, as Heather was just mentioning, in our classroom, we could maybe mirror some of that language, like making some small talk every day, for example, so that a student working in healthcare could do the same thing with a patient, for example. Having similar routines, like maybe having students check their temperature when they come into the room or things like that.
Or even technology, especially for those working in career pathways or an integrated education and training program. Knowing what that technology is at the end that the learners will have to do is so important to integrate into your curriculum and make it almost a norm in the classroom.
Yes. And again, routines and norms are closely related. A routine is a sequence of actions regularly followed. I'm sure many of you have warm-up routines, or you have routines around using exit tickets at the end of the day, those types of things. A norm is more about a student's behavior. Like a norm might be, when you are absent, I expect that you contact me. Or as I spoke about earlier, if you miss class, the norm is that you get caught up by accessing the resources I have made available to you, like recordings, for example.
And that's mirroring that college expectation. I don't think anyone is going to interrupt the college professor to get caught up in the middle of a class session. So it is really to the benefit of our learners that we incorporate these norms in our classroom.
Exactly. And once again, we know routines are a favorite part of ACES TIF. And so we wanted to invite you to maybe think about using routines or language, norms, learning task formats, or technology. Are there any TIF methods that you currently use in your class? And if so, we'd love to have you share that either in the chat or using your voice. Any norms related to developing a future pathway specifically?
Well, Stephanie, I'll use my voice, but I'm not teaching right now a career pathway class, but when I have taught in the past, I tried to mirror that environment, either technology, as much as possible. But I think about even for students to know how to apply for a job on different websites. So another colleague and I, we would open up, let's say the class was for healthcare. We would open up maybe a line of healthcare and say, where on this website would you go to apply for a job? So that was our TIF method. It was practicing looking on a website for where to apply for a job. Sometimes they say job, sometimes they say career, sometimes they say join us.
Or
So
work for us.
Yeah, work for us, that language. And Krista is saying, I regularly share with learners the spreadsheet that Carly made about the online job training classes they can access. Lots of learners are interested. Some can do it now, but for others, it's just good to know about these options. Yeah, you're creating that pathway, Maybe they're not able to integrate into those classes now, but it is for the future, developing that future pathway. Thank you, Krista. I love that. And many students talk to you about it, Krista. So that's wonderful, making that connection in your program. We might just be tapping Krista to share that routine and maybe earn a CEU.
Yes. So there is an ACES routine small library that we have been hoping to grow. And so if you go to the link that Carly will chat out, you can see some routines that have been created and submitted by other ABE professionals in Minnesota. These are routines that you can use. And we would love to have you add your own routine to our library. And if you do, you can earn a CEU just by filling out a form and sharing what you're already doing with other practitioners in our state.
And I would even encourage Dawn as a manager, if you see something, say something to a staff member to do something, which would be, hey, submit that for a routine. I think too often adult educators we're a humble bunch and we don't want people to know the great things happening in our classroom, but they are great and we should be sharing.
Absolutely. Okay, well, we are going to continue along and zoom into navigating systems.
Great, and this is the final module within the 6 categories for the online course. It's module 8. And if you follow along on your TIF, we're heading towards the end of the book, pages 43 through 48. I think even navigating the TIF is navigating systems, getting
That's
through it.
true.
But navigating systems is that ability to operate within institutions and organizational structures.
And so this talking again about the driver's license for all, the way that this is laid out with these 6 steps really is a perfect visual example and representation of when students ask me, what does navigating systems mean? I always say it means completing a series of steps in order to reach a desired goal. And so we would have to complete these 6 steps to get our driver's license. And if we did that, we would be navigating a system, right? Some other examples that I sometimes use for my adult diploma students would be something like applying for unemployment, applying for public assistance. If you're a parent, maybe helping your child get approved for some sort of learning accommodations or services at school. We had a student in our program use getting her own GED accommodations approved as evidence of navigating systems. So she had to go to her doctor, get a letter, apply, reach out to Pearson VUE to get the accommodation approved and all of that. So in our lives, we so often have to navigate complex systems. And so I feel like this category is really, really critical because it just overlaps with, I think, every area of our lives.
And that's what people are saying. Patsy notes it's her favorite category. And Patsy, I remember when we were working on this, 10 years ago, we were talking just about driving to Hamlin because those parking meters were new and trying to navigate this.
Yo,
You remember that, the parking meters?
I do. And you came in like a minute late and you're like, I was navigating system. Like that stuck with me. I think navigating systems, like it affects everything else.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So these are the 3 skills, the 3 big skills from the navigating systems category. Seek information or assistance appropriately from others in order to successfully navigate specific systems. Identify and comply with rules, policies, and performance expectations within institutional and organizational structures. Identify and follow norms of an organizational structure.
And then further within the TIF are these example activities that you can find for every category. But for navigating systems, students complete a graphic organizer with information about how to apply for some sort of service, like insurance, financial aid, career counseling, or as you gave Stephanie, that great example of GED accommodations. And I just have to say, how many times have we brought up graphic organizers in all of these categories? Another one is students read examples of different types of communication, example, email, text, and rank them according to the level of formality. Oh, that's a great activity. And students craft a letter to a landlord, teacher, or boss that explains a problem and suggests a solution. I've done that in the past for so many students. It was an activity, especially the landlord, to request something to be done.
Yes, this last one really gets at that skill of self-advocacy.
Yeah, and Krista is also saying it's so important for all of us, but so difficult for our American learners.
Our new
New
American.
American learners, and I would agree with that. So again, we're looking at page 43 of the TIF. You can read this the actual skill, the sub-skills, and then those activities, and they range in their complexity. So I just appreciate this category so much. It is the last one, but sometimes it could be the first one that we all want to accomplish.
So again, we're going to have you look at the activity examples on pages 43 through page 48. And we are going to ask you to choose one that you think you might be able to use with your learners, or one that just looks interesting to you. And we will think about how you might use it. What is the activity? You could say why it appeals to you, and what tweaks you would have to make in order to use it. So we know it's going to take you just a moment to look. We'll look as well.
And Stephanie, I'm drawn to page 44, the technology activities for skill 1, sub-skill C, demonstrate appropriate self-advocacy when faced with barriers. And it's using a list of phrases, request help from peers during any computer activity. Can you help me? Can you show me that again? Or often, I don't know where to refresh, or how do you refresh? How do I adjust the audio? We could use that in our learning management system classes, but even with all of us online, it's Zoom. Those are really good skills to incorporate.
Absolutely. I'm looking at page 45, and I am looking at differentiating formal and informal speech, dress, and communication. And I like the skill that is in the third column, create and publish online written guidelines for making a positive impression during a particular task or event. And this might be a little bit of a expansion on that idea, but Heather and I both teach citizenship classes, and we had several students pass recently, and then some of them came and joined our online class after having passed their test and talked about what their interviews were like. And I could imagine having students create sort of like a tip list or a best practices guide for other students about how to conduct oneself during that interview in order to have the best possible outcome.
That's a great idea. And Krista is putting it in the chat, skill 1, subset A, telling learners about the United Way 211. I am not sure if they have used this, but I often share this when learners have questions and I don't know the answer. Exactly, that self-advocacy. There might even be different languages available on 211. I'm not sure about that, Krista, but I thought they had different languages.
Ah, okay. And then Krista says reading skills has a text about calling 211. Okay, great.
That's wonderful.
What about others? What is a lesson in here that intrigues you or kind of gets you thinking or inspires you?
I know, Stephanie, I've done this often on page 48, explore one career cluster, and then have a chart so students are navigating, determining a future pathway, and they're exploring it. They could be recording the salary, the training skills needed. So effectively, they're determining that pathway, but they could also list pro and cons for going into that job field area.
Mm-hmm. And I know we're sharing a lot of external resources today, but there is a resource called the Teaching Skills for Today's Adults lesson collection that's available on the Links website. And in there are a couple of different problem-solving lessons that put me in mind of what we see on page 47, where students are given a few different scenarios and they have to discuss with others in their small group what would be the best solution and why. One of them I remember has to do with you're offered a job, but if you take that job, there are a number of factors, such as maybe the job is at a time of day when you wouldn't have childcare, and then you'd have to pay for childcare, or the job requires you to relocate to another town, and then kind of thinking about if you lost your friends and your support network. So they're really rich kind of scenarios that provide a lot of opportunity to discuss different creative solutions. And so I would encourage you to check that out if you're looking for new ideas. The toolkit contains 25 lessons that can just be taken and used. And many of them overlap with this TIF skills.
Yeah, and I shared that link in the chat. I'm also thinking about some students maybe mentioning uncertainty with the future, with the incoming administration, and so navigating those skills, those systems on maybe preparing should some members of their family need to leave the country. So there's all sorts of ways that we can be supporting students ahead of a situation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Carly mentions that idea of having students work on writing a letter, or you could have them do, you know, a practice dialogue if you didn't want them writing about talking with someone like a landlord or a boss about an issue. And I think so often our students maybe need that language. They need the language around how to advocate for themselves. Another idea I just had is, I'm not sure if any of you are familiar with the website We Speak New York. It is a collection of videos and lessons that are put together by the city of New York City, to help specifically new Americans navigate living here in the United States. And all of the videos are geared specifically towards adult audiences, and all of the videos feature very diverse people, characters. And there's one called Rolando's Work Rights. And in that video, Rolando is trying to get some pay, some wages he believes he's owed by a former employer. And it does a great job of talking about things like how you're protected if you're, you know, a whistleblower, and your different rights at work. And we've had great conversations in my listening and speaking class after showing that video.
That's great. And when you are describing some of these, I shared that link in the chat, but I also know various cities might have links to services that they have to support students. I know in the city of Minneapolis, there are a number of areas that where you can get supports, and that is knowing your rights, especially with the change in wages and accrued vacation or sick leave. Actually, it's accrued sick leave.
Mhm. All right, great.
Thanks for sharing in the chat, everyone. We know that the ACES is a process. We need to assess, complement, evaluate, study, and reflect.
And if we think again about our driver's license for all example, can you think of any way you could use this website, maybe the materials found on the website to practice navigating systems, help to develop those skills with your learners? And if so, what are you thinking? If you could share in the chat, or of course you could use your voice, that would be fantastic.
And I know with this specifically, Stephanie, I've helped some students because they weren't sure whether or not they could take the exam in their native language. So we went to the website to see what sort of languages the exam is offered in. And then we learned that there is academic language in all other languages. So students were questioning some of the words they didn't know in their first language.
So that sounds to me like skill 1, seek information or assistance appropriately. And 1A, identify and utilize resources. So
Yeah.
understanding that you could download the driver's manual in Spanish, for example,
Exactly.
would be a perfect overlap with this. And what does Krista
She
say?
says this is another good reminder to tell learners every couple of months. Navigating systems is a good place for this lesson. Yeah, I think it's not a one and done lesson. Our learners come and they go, and we are here to support them along all those different levels.
Yeah, I even think back to the example we had last webinar about winter survival that we've talked about a
Yeah.
little bit, a lot to do with navigating systems there as well. Thinking about who one might call if stranded. You know, what would I need to keep in my car in case of an emergency? Practicing language if I needed to pull over on the side of the road and someone stopped to help me, what would I say
Yeah.
to them? Those kinds of things.
I'm just thinking back to the jumper cables.
Yeah.
How do I hook up jumper cables? Like, what's the sequence I need to navigate that system to get my car up and running?
Mhm.
Krista says my other pet topic is the hands-free cell phone law. So many important laws and systems that our learners need to know about. Exactly, Krista, you bring this up because laws change all the time. Some laws begin in July 1, others August 1. Some maybe will begin July 1. I think also about navigating systems for people who have gone through FAFSA. Hoping that is one heck of a system in all of the changes this year for those learners who are at that level, but supporting their children as well.
Yes, and understanding all of the documents that need to be organized and available in order to complete a FAFSA. In fact, I just this weekend worked on the FAFSA with my son, who's a college or a high school senior. And what we learned is that we had not been keeping copies of his tax records. So he's had a summer job, he's worked a little bit, never earned a ton of money, but we had not been downloading and keeping copies of his tax returns. And it asks for that information on the FAFSA. And so we had to think of a workaround there.
And Krista wants to tear her hair out because of FAFSA. But that is a complex system to navigate, and we all have academic language in English, and it's still a very complex situation.
Yes. Another one that comes to mind from citizenship classes is so many of our students, I found out, are not aware of the selective service requirement. And if they're women, I've had a lot of women tell me their sons didn't know about it because I guess what they were saying is, where was I supposed to learn about this?
Yeah.
And so just so many things that we could help our students out with by creating little lessons or opportunities for them to seek information in class. All right, and once again, our TIF methods, thinking about our TIF methods and navigating systems. I think one that I do quite a bit, one that's a routine in my class, we call it the question of the week. Or the question of the day, excuse me, we do it about once a week, where students, I put a question on a slide as part of our warm-up, and I tell students they need to find the answer to the question. And the purpose of doing that is to help to build their own self-efficacy around finding answers, rather than asking me questions during class, like we're talking about the Constitution and someone asked me who wrote the Constitution. Well, that's a great question of the day. We can look that up all together and find out.
And Krista is just agreeing about selective service, and that's
Mhm.
if their children went to school in a US high school. And I would say even some folks might not know it if they went to school in a US high school. Carol says, I'm teaching ESL to adults who are currently working in agriculture here in southern Minnesota.
Mhm.
They are working in pig farms and have their families with them. For families, the biggest issue is the type of visas. Oh my gosh, navigating that system they have as they are not able to work in the US. I am really enjoying the websites and resources you are sharing. I am volunteering with the GED learner and you have given me a lot of food for thought. Is this class going to be offered again? Well, Carol, our webinar won't be offered again. However, we're going to encourage you, if you can, to go and maybe watch our second webinar. There is the foundations course if you're looking for CEUs and learning more, and you can do a deeper dive into each category. But I'm glad that we're giving you so much food for thought.
Absolutely. That's what this is all about. Great. So just thinking again about those routines, those norms around navigating systems. I know a norm in our program that I'm sure many of you use is trying to think of ways to help students keep track of their different passwords, right? Maybe it's a worksheet, maybe it's taking a picture of it on their phone, maybe it's putting a little note in their phone for their passwords. But we need our students to be able to log into Schoology. We need them to be able to log into Aztec and some other distance learning platforms. And if they can't remember those passwords, that really becomes complicated.
Yeah, and I just put something in the chat using the SID student portal so that students can navigate their own schedules and their own testing information. So again, it's not always coming, teacher, help me, but we're providing these systems for them to self-navigate.
Yes. And so if you have been working through the course as we've been doing these webinars, hopefully after today's webinar, you would have some great ideas of skills and sub-skills and maybe a routine to add to your final assignment, which is the My Students Transition Map. And so you could add that to your document. And remember, you have to complete the modules in Canvas as well as submit the final assignment in order to complete the course and get those CEUs. All right.
So let's do this, friends. Let's make it to the finish line. I would say maybe a goal is let's get it done before the new year. That could be one goal. We have some suggestions to help you finish that ACES Foundations course. One is setting a deadline for completion with a calendar or checklist. It could be 12/31 of this year. Create a routine and study environment. Find a study buddy to have check-ins. I think about maybe even doing a PLC at your program. That could be something, Dawn, maybe you have a group of folks who want to work on it together. What are some other strategies that you might have to share this work And to make it fun, you can always share in the chat.
Mhm.
Did anyone mention to you strategies they used when it was in Schoology?
To get through it?
Yeah, to get through.
I think just using the checklist for your own organization to keep track of what you had finished. I'm a big list maker, and I think there's something intrinsically rewarding about checking things off of a list and being able to see that I finished this step. And I think then you see that you're getting closer to being completed, right?
You have that checklist, I remove the Post-it note.
Yeah.
So one less Post-it note.
Absolutely. So we do hope that you will, if your goal was to finish the course, that you feel like you have all the tools that you need to do that. And if you have just been, if you've been doing these webinars, because you wanted to learn more about this topic and refresh and get some ideas, we hope you've gotten that and that you maybe do share with some people at work, share a resource, share an idea. I know in our program, we have what's called the weekly update, which is just a weekly newsletter that goes out. Sometimes when I come across a really great new resource, I might ask for that to be included in the weekly update so that other people can see it.
Yeah, we don't learn in a vacuum, folks. And I do agree with Krista, slow and steady wins the race.
Absolutely. So we have a couple of minutes left. If anyone has any questions, we'd be happy to answer them.
We appreciate your engaged typings in the chat and speaking. It really helps us know that we're all in it together.
Absolutely. And I think Carly had a couple of final comments. Yeah, Carly?
I'm coming. Here we go. So, yeah, we're just about done with this webinar, and this is the final one in the series. So feel free to reference those recordings in the chat. I shared an Atlas announcement link, which is going to have trainings through the end of the school year for lots of different topics. And then if you are looking specifically for more transition themed activities, like the ACES TIF course and anything like that, you're going to find it on the transitions one pager. And if you want to click to the next link, I just want to remind, or the next screen.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yep.
Yeah, no problem. We will be sending out one final evaluation for this webinar. And then now that the series is complete, the CEUs will be sent out. And there are several of you who have been here for all three. Thank you very much. And so you are going to be eligible for those additional CEUs. Otherwise, if you made it to one or two, you're still going to get CEUs for the time that you were here. And it was a great series, you guys. We learned a lot, and it helps to just kind of reflect together like this. And I always feel like my creative juices really flowing during these.
Yeah, thank you,
Absolutely.
Stephanie and Heather. Really appreciate your work. I'm going to stop the recording.